All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Mitch Stokes. I'm the owner and head coach of Fluid Fitness Solutions, and I'm here to talk to you today about several different exercises, different methodologies that I see throughout the fitness industry and several gyms, other training facilities that either get misused, maybe get used too often for the wrong purposes, thinking that there's going to be carryover or it's going to help the client. And I'm going to dispel some misconceptions as far as that goes. I have a short list here, just 4 basic things, basic exercises we're going to go over to talk about. It's been a couple weeks. I was out of town. We try to do a live feed from on location in San Diego. There wasn't very good connectivity being the neighborhood that we were at. We were too close to a mountainside, so we didn't end up doing that show. Hopefully in the future, Scott will be on the show in the next couple of weeks when we have time to get him situated. We'll just have to do it remotely from here. So we are still going to schedule that nutritional advice talk. So just to start off, before I get into all the meat and potatoes, like I usually say, this isn't a blanket statement for everything. Some of these exercises are really great. I use them myself on my athletes and on my personal training clients, but the key thing is they're done correctly with correct technique and they're done for the right purposes. So I'm not saying that these exercises are inherently bad. You just have to be mindful about how you use them. So the first thing I'm going to go over, a big one, is speed training, speed and agility training, and plyometrics. Otherwise, box jumps, hurdle hops, things like that. They get misused wildly. They're used as a training tool to develop speed and agility, or at least that's how these programs are marketed and advertised. They're marketed as a speed and agility session. But what usually happens is they use it as a conditioning tool. They fatigue the athlete or they fatigue the client. Once you hit the level of fatigue, you're no longer training speed. You're actually moving slower. Anytime you're producing results where you're moving slower, sloppier, worse footwork, what ends up happening is you get slower. You get slower results. It's a complete opposite of what you want. And true speed training is lower volume, lots of rest in between intervals. If you're talking about like training a sprinter or a football player, rugby player, you need proper work and rest intervals. If you don't have enough rest to recover in between those speed cycles, you're really not training speed. You're training cardiovascular. They're 2 different things. Just because you're huffing and puffing and sweating doesn't mean you're getting results as far as becoming a faster athlete or faster runner. Generally, what you're doing is you're training endurance. You're training muscular endurance, which is great. You do need to do those things, but it's a misuse and it's a misallocation of the term speed and agility training. You need to do it appropriately. Speed ladders, that's a big one. There's a really good article on the speed ladder that I'm going to post later in the comments. Walking as you speak, don't trip. Let's see here. Yeah, the speed ladder. Dean Somerset, DeanSomerset.com. Really knowledgeable guy. He has an article called The Speed Ladder Fallacy. Okay, speed ladders are good when used correctly. They're a great warm-up to get ready for speed and agility drills. Speed and agility work, but inherently they're not great for actually producing speed results. The footwork drills, what you're doing is you're moving in a pattern. You're not moving horizontally through space very fast, which is really what you want. If you're talking about building a faster athlete, you want to get from point A to point B horizontally running as quickly as possible. When you're doing a speed ladder, you're moving very vertical like this. And because you're using short, choppy steps, you're not opening up your stride. You're not producing a lot of force horizontally, which scientifically, the formula for speed is force times distance over time. So the more force I can apply over a larger distance quickly, I'm going to move faster. So I need to have stronger, more explosive legs. So weightlifting's great for that. Moving over a larger distance. So you're talking about a larger stride length. That's why a lot of taller athletes are able to cover a large distance. You'll see them get down the field a lot quicker than a shorter one. and you need to do it faster. You need to cover distance faster. So really moving like this up and down vertically, short choppy steps, isn't training horizontal speed. You're just working on coordination, and that's what it's great for. It's really originally meant to work on the coordination, especially in young untrained athletes. If you're talking like midget football age into junior high, even high school. In the past, they use tires, nets, different type of drill ladders like that to force them to raise your knees up, get their feet moving, not land so flat-footed all the time. You want to be on the balls of the feet, ready to move, be reactive. But it doesn't necessarily make you faster. It just makes you more coordinated. So great warm-up tool, wakes the body up, gets your heart rate up a little bit, but really not meant for speed training. Box jumps. Box jumps are great. I use them for lifters. I use them to train basketball players, football players, track and field athletes. It's a great tool if you're doing it correctly. Now, there's different type of plyometric exercises. There's hurdle hops. There's depth jumps, reactive jumps where you're rebounding off the ground. You're training reactive speed, that stretch reflex. But if you're doing it in a high volume setting where you're talking about, well, we're going to do 60 jumps today, that's just insane. Track and field athletes wouldn't do that in practice. Okay, you have to have meaningful volume, just like we talked about when we talked about endurance training. Doing volume of work just for the sake of doing a ton of work and getting the athlete tired and fatigued isn't going to really help them. It's actually going to make them worse. If you want them to operate in that 90 percentile range and above and be improving on their skill and on their jumps, you really need to keep it to a minimum. As soon as they break down form, they look fatigued, that's when you stop for the day and you move on to something else. Like you do abdominal core work, or you do some strength training, or you just give them rest. Beating up their legs and doing 50, 60 box jumps in a row really isn't great for their actual speed and explosiveness. What you end up doing is you're training endurance. You're also putting them at risk for disaster, having an injury. Plenty of people out there, I've run into people at coaching seminars, coaches that have had ruptured Achilles. The more put on that area of the body repetitively, and they're doing it at their practice as well because they're running, they're on their feet constantly, and then you're doing the same thing and never resting that part of the body, and you're doing a ton of volume on the plyometric boxes. Chances are eventually it's not an if, it's a when something's going to happen. You're putting them at a higher risk. So you want to avoid that. You want controlled sets of 5 to 10 jumps at most, really. Good workout would be a set of cleans or a set of squats or deadlifts in a controlled set, 5 to 10 reps, preferably around 5. And then maybe a 30 to 60 second rest, and then a controlled set of jumps, at a moderate to a moderately difficult height. It doesn't need to be super high. You don't really need to max out on your box jump. You got to look at the risk versus reward with an exercise like that. Am I going to get a lot out of jumping super, super high once and possibly falling down and breaking an ankle, and ruining your athlete's season? Or are you going to get more out of giving them a height that's difficult, that's going to challenge them, that's going to force them to jump hard and to work hard, but in a controlled setting where they get it as much out of as they need to, and then they're able to come back and train the next day because they're not injured. And that's really your job, is to keep them from getting hurt and getting results at the same time. Let's see what else we have here. Achilles tendon ruptures, warm-ups. Okay. I think that's all we need to cover as far as speed training. The only other thing I'm going to say as far as sprinting, we just had a player down in Maryland passed away recently, and we're still waiting to hear other details. But the general story is the coaches or the trainers, someone on the staff, had the team or had this particular athlete running sprints, reportedly at 110 yards. Nothing's really known right now as far as the repetition, what the conditions were. It wasn't really a hot day from what I understand. It was warm enough in full pads. Now, what point is it appropriate to run those distances for conditioning or speed work? 110 yards, fine if you're going to do a handful of them. It's fine if you have appropriate rest in between, but if you're just doing suicides, so to speak, 110 yards down, you're setting back up and going again, you're really not getting the athlete to get any faster. They're going to run slower. They're going to get more sluggish. They're going to get fatigued. You could have possible heat injuries like this gentleman did and unfortunately passed away. Something for all coaches and all parents, or parent coaches that are involved in youth athletics. Should you not have your kid run at all? No. They definitely need to run. They definitely need conditioning, but you should always err on the side of caution. Look at the conditions. Look at how fatigued the kids are. Do they need to do 20 sprints? No. 5 to 10. Give them a good, appropriate rest. Get quality out of their work and make sure that they're having fun. Because at the end of the day, when a 12-year-old steps on the field and they're learning to play football, they should be having fun. So take that for what it's worth. Deadlifts. Deadlifts is a great exercise. Strengthens the back, the abdominal wall, your legs, your hamstrings, your glutes. Even gets your lats engaged, your upper back. It's a great strengthening exercise for any athlete, any general fitness client. They should be doing deadlifts. If your trainer's not having you deadlifts, you should rethink that. But my bone to pick is a mixed grip deadlift. Plenty of people out there in the powerlifting world have actually moved to an overhand grip. They might use a mixed grip on occasion for a heavy single, but when you're talking about training for several months to several years, that mixed grip, it does a couple of things. It puts undue stress on your bicep tendon with the hand that's underhand. So when I'm talking about that mixed grip deadlift is instead of an overhand even grip, I'm reaching under with the other hand so that I can get a better solid grip on the bar. And I don't lose the bar during the lift. That is the whole point, is to be able to maintain grip on the bar. Now what happens is that stress on the tendon, that bicep, puts you at risk for a possible rupture or tear. And also what happens is your shoulder actually drops. You get a little contorted. And if you look at anyone that's deadlifting with a mixed grip, and I mean anybody, I don't care how experienced of a lifter they are, they're going to develop an imbalance in their body over time, especially if they're lifting that for several years. You don't get as much lat engagement on one side. So the whole time you're deadlifting, you're supposed to keep the weight close to your body. You're supposed to rake it in. And the way you do that is you engage your lats, not by pulling with the arms, but engaging the lats and keeping the upper back active. When you have this mixed grip, this is pushing the lat, keeping the bar close. You're not doing it with this side. In fact, you're actually kind of curling and pulling. You have a tendency you'll see elbows kind of bend a little bit during the initial pull off the floor. That's not good. Okay, for one, like I said, undue stress on the bicep tendon, but also because that lat's never engaging during your deadlift training, and let's say you're deadlifting, doing some kind of deadlifts twice a week or even just once a week, and you're doing a lot of volume over time, what ends up happening is that lat gets kind of lazy, gets kind of weak. It starts to affect your deadlift. You start to twist, and it starts to carry into your other lifts. People don't realize how much they use their lat, their upper back, that whole side of your body that runs down into your spinal erectors when you do back squats. You're pulling with those lats to tighten up your posterior. If you have one side that's stronger than the other, significant imbalance, you're going to have problems. You might just, get some strains on that side to even some side twisting. You'll see a lot of drifting with people's bench presses. They get affected by poor lat engagement, especially on a heavy single or heavy triple. They'll start to pop that elbow. It'll flare. They'll twist and turn. They won't know what's going on. They're trying to keep that lat tucked in, but they can't figure out why. It's because they've built that imbalance. It's an inactive lat. It doesn't get used quite as much, even though they might be doing like rows, barbell rows, dumbbell rows, things like that to keep up on it. There's something to be said for isometric strength and just actively activating the lat to keep that bar close during a deadlift. It affects your one side of your body if you're not doing that. So great thing would be to do if you can't hold on to the bar. One, work on your grip strength, especially if you're really new to lifting and you can't hold on to the bar and you can't pick it up. It's a sign that maybe you're picking up a weight you're not ready for. It might be appropriate to think about using some lighter loads. Now, you should still be lifting heavy to get the most out of it, but heavy is a relative word. It's heavy for you. If you're not strong enough to hold on to the bar for like a set of 5, going to a mixed grip right away, maybe not the answer. Maybe drop the load a little bit and do some extra grip strengthening work after your deadlift session is over. It's a simple fix. Maybe you have small hands and it doesn't matter how strong your grip is. Well, think about using straps. People look at straps with this negative light like it's some kind of cheat. It's safer. You get that overhand grip. You don't have to worry about letting go. You get good lat engagement, and you're not worried about an injury to your bicep tendon. And another thing you could do, and I know it's not popular out there, and people complain that it's uncomfortable, that it hurts. I like to hook grip. If I don't have straps and I'm just pulling a heavy single or a heavy triple or deadlift, hook grip it. That's when we take the barbell, we wrap the thumb around, and then the rest of the digits around that to create a little bit of a vise. It actually sits deeper in your hand, in your palms. You have a better surface contact with the bar to begin with. It feels more solid. For me, I feel like I get better upper back engagement because of this. It's a little uncomfortable when you're first learning how to use it. The thumbs hurt. It's tough on the skin. If you put a little thumb tape on, you watch a few videos, and I can post some stuff out there in the comments about how to properly hook grip. You get used to it after a while. Does it ever feel 100% wonderful? No, hook grip sucks, but it's a lot better than ending up in a hospital. And I have personally known people this has happened to. I've seen it happen. Powerlifter years ago that I had mutual friends with. They were training in the gym, visiting, and I brought up the idea like, well, have you ever thought about going to an overhand grip or even switching the grip that you use, rather than doing this all the time, maybe alternate every other week, just to avoid the imbalance. I didn't even mention bicep tendon. They looked at me like I was nuts. And the attitude is, well, I've been doing this a long time, and this is the way I pull during competition, so I'm going to do it the same way during training. And specificity, there is something to be said for that, but you can pull that way in competition. Doesn't necessarily mean you need to do it all the time. You can save it for that heavy single, or for a meet, you're only doing 3 lifts on the deadlift. You're probably less likely to hurt yourself versus doing it all the time, 365 days out of the year, 52 weeks straight, training with that imbalanced grip. You're setting yourself up for more possible problems there. Let's see here. Grip under train cannot. Asymmetries. Okay, I think that's all we have for the deadlifts. Like I said, I love these exercises. They just need to be done correctly and safely for you to get the most out of them, and so you can train pain-free, injury-free. The next thing I'm going to cover is bench press. Now, I program bench press for my football players at the local high school. I don't really do it with the junior high and middle school into midgets. They don't really need that. Most of them can just get plenty of strength training from doing bodyweight exercises like push-ups. When I do have them lift weights for a pressing exercise, I generally work on their overhead mobility. That's a major problem with a lot of young football players, is their mobility is just poor. So we try to work on overhead, being able to get to a good, nice fixed position. And if I do bench press, we'll do something called a floor press, where they're laying on the back on the ground, and they're not bringing themselves into that compromised shoulder position, or they do push-ups. They learn to control their body that way. It's actually a freer position for the shoulders. If you look at bench, mechanically, when you're benching correctly, you have your shoulders pinched back, and then they're locked into place. The scapula isn't able to move freely, which after a while you can develop a very poor health in the range of motion of your shoulders. It's really not recommended for anyone to bench press excessively. And when I mean excessively, there's programs out there that call for bench press 3 times a week. You can press 3 times a week or press twice a week, but I would stay away from specifying to just strictly bench press. Even powerlifters out there, they spend time on the overhead press, the military press, the push press. They'll do dumbbell bench press. They'll get on the dip bar. There's different ways of training pressing exercises to improve your bench, besides just benching all the time. So that's one thing to take into consideration. I wouldn't make it the primary focus of your program, especially if you're not a power lifter. If you're using the power lifts or using strength lifts to improve for your sport, you need to look at a little bit more variation. Look at what's really going to help your sport. Typically, when you look at bench press, people think, well, for alignment, it makes sense because they have to push someone horizontally across the field. It's partially true, but one thing you have to remember is you're bracing yourself with your body and legs. You're not laying on your back, bench pressing the opponent away from you. Same thing with wrestling or sumo wrestling. A lot of sports contact sports, they talk about where, you should bench. You really don't need to bench that often because there's actually very little carryover. Something better would be like a jammer machine, a push press, where you're actually loading the hips, training the athlete to move from core to extremity, to be explosive with their hips to generate speed, and then finish with the arms. It's a little bit more applicable to what they're doing on the field of play here, rather than just bench press. It's a fine exercise. It's a great strength exercise, but it doesn't need to be your sole focus if you're a football player. Now, do they do it in the NFL Combine? Yes, and it's a little antiquated as far as measuring the ability of an athlete. Me, if I was the head coach of a collegiate or NFL program, I would really care less how much they bench. If they bench a decent amount, that's fine. I'm more impressed by how much they can squat, deadlift, power clean. Can they run a 40 in a decent amount of time? Are they explosive? Are they fast? And their shoulder health. I'm more impressed by their shoulder health. Are they going to break right away in the first cup within the first season? If they're going to do a check on a functional mobility check on the person to see if they're more likely to be injured, I'd rather invest my money. If you're talking about dropping several $1 million on an athlete for a contract, I'm going to want the one that's more durable, not necessarily the one that can bench 225 20 times. It's kind of an antiquated drill. It's more for show. Most people are aware that the NFL Combine really isn't the end-all be-all as far as how their career is going to go. There's plenty of people that do great at the Combine that don't do anything on the field. So that's something to take into consideration, is that you can put your energy and your focus elsewhere besides just doing bench press. For one, you could spend a little bit more time on your upper back, your rotator cuff, keeping that healthy, especially if you're a quarterback. Nobody cares how much nobody cares how much Tom Brady benches. What they care about is, are his shoulders healthy enough to make it through an entire season without falling apart? Rotator cuff, external rotation exercises, things like that, where you're moving outward and working on the upper back, your supraspinatus, rather than working on pressing and internally rotating your shoulders all the time and tightening up the pecs constantly. That's what's going to help you out last your a longer career than bench press. Last thing I'm going to get into, sit-ups and crunches. And in general, just core training in general, I see a lot of people, and people come to the gym all the time, well, I really want to do some core training. Well, it's a misconception out there that doing sit-ups and doing a bunch of crunches and other abdominal work is going to get you a stronger core. At a certain point, you're going to get less results. If you're an untrained person, you're sedentary, and I have you do sit-ups and crunches, that's one thing. Yes, you're going to get results because you're not used to doing anything. You're adding a stimulus to an organism that's never done anything. Yes, you're going to get results. But someone that's a high-level athlete or even intermediate, and they've done that groundwork already, you can only do so many sit-ups to the point where it's not going to do anything for you anymore. You need to do something else. And really, a lot of the compound lifts that we do in here and that are done at strength and conditioning facilities for these teams are doing more for their core strength than 1,000 sit-ups could ever do for them. You're talking like the deadlift, the squat, the Olympic lifts are really good because not only does it teach you to tighten up before you lift, it teaches you to stay tight and receive a force coming back at you when you're talking about like a full squat clean, the catch position for that. You're exerting a force, you're changing direction, and then you're absorbing a force again and standing up out of the squat. That has more carryover as far as strength for the field and keeping you from getting injured. Let's say if you get hit, absorbing a force, if you're an offensive player, that has more carryover than 1,000 sit-ups. Doing a 100 sit-up challenge a day, that's going to do very little for someone like that. So great core training would be more like doing a heavy lifting session, doing your compound lifts, maybe doing some abdominal work, but really what it should be is isometric exercises like planks, and I mean challenging planks where they're done correctly. A lot of time you see planks and the athlete is bowed at the belly, they're not contracted tight, they're really not exercising their abdominal wall and their low back. So RKC planks, otherwise known as Russian planks, where the base of support, the elbows are moved out in front of the face to extend the body a little bit more. It makes it more difficult, puts more strain on the abdominal wall, things like that. Ab rollers, ring fallouts, exercises like that, hollow body rocks, L-sits, things like that, where they're not necessarily moving and contracting over and over again. And the other thing you see with sit-ups and crunches is over time, especially if they're done incorrectly, you can actually see low back herniations, spinal herniations of the discs because of that back and forth, opening, closing, opening, closing. You'll see that their hip flexors get fried up. They get really tight from moving at that range of motion over and over again. A lot of flutter kicks, leg lifts, things like that. Now, those things are appropriate, especially early on in training, doing very basic preparation exercises. But like I said, for someone that's really wants some core training, you're going to get little results, and you're actually going to possibly injure yourself after a while. Another thing that goes on when people do sit-ups and crunches, they're smashing their low back into the ground and their hips into the ground over and over again, which is not good either. You're putting impact on your low spine. If you're going to do sit-ups and you're going to have your client do sit-ups, having them do it correctly, like by having their hips glued to the floor, not moving up and down at the hips, and just keeping the belly tight, maybe doing 20 at a time, 10 at a time for a few sets, that's plenty. They don't need to do them until they look like they're going to puke. If you're always going to the point where you're so fatigued and so exhausted that you look like you can't even come in the next day, it's really not that beneficial. Doing the right amount of work, and if you're working with a good, seasoned, educated coach, do the right amount of work. Sometimes it's going to feel like you're not doing enough because you're not beat up, you're not sweating, you don't feel like you're going to die, you're not dying. They know what they're doing. If you're an athlete that's in a new facility like that, trust the process, just go with it. You'll find better results working smarter and not necessarily harder all the time. That coach will tell you when it's appropriate to push hard. When it is time to go hard and go heavy on your set of back squats or run the 40 or run 100 for intervals, they're going to have you do it, but it's going to be after they lay that base work that sets you up for that phase of your training. So that's something to consider, is you don't need to beat yourself up all the time. And that goes with any exercise. High volume isn't always necessarily the answer. So unless anyone has any questions, I think I'm going to sign off for the night. You guys can catch this episode on our YouTube channel, Fluid Fitness Solutions. Make sure you subscribe, like, comment. If you want to get a hold of me, you can email me at the gym, or you can PM us on our Facebook page. Check out our Instagram. We are having a special, a back to school special this month until the end of August. It's 50% off your membership if you pay up 3 months in advance. So that's not a deal we hand out very often. I can't remember the last time we had that kind of a discount in here. If you're thinking about jumping in here, now's really the time. It's a great window of opportunity. If you're curious about what we do in here, you want to make a change, you want to start a new fitness program, next couple of weeks, if you can get in here by the 31st, get in here before September 4th, before Labor Day weekend, and get yourself signed up. All you got to do is come in here, or you can email or call us and mention the discount, mention the back to school special, and we'll get you guys set up. We also have the new U Challenge coming up in September. I believe it starts September 4th or September 5th. It's the Tuesday right after Labor Day. That's a 6-week challenge. It's meant for people who either are looking to make a change, they haven't exercised in a long time, or they're completely sedentary and haven't done anything before. We're going to get you in a small group. There's probably not going to be more than 6 people allowed in the group. You're going to be working hand in hand with a coach. You're going to have nutritional advice available to you. We're going to work hand in hand with you on that. We're going to come in twice a week in the evenings, 6 o'clock, Tuesdays and Thursdays for 6 weeks. Get you started, get you moving in the right direction so that you can make the appropriate changes to change your lifestyle and have a healthier lifestyle and improve your quality of life. So anyone that's interested, email us, call us, message me here. You can message me on the Facebook page and get in touch. That is all for tonight. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you next week.